All right, it's 12 o'clock. It's Wednesday. It's time for this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar, and actually the last webinar of 2025. So if you've been on for multiple webinars in 2025, thank you so very much for attending. Hopefully you have found them of some use. Um, I know that I and we at the Iowa Learning Farms very much enjoy putting on the webinars, and I hope that you all that have attended maybe multiple webinars have found value in them. This week, we are really fortunate to have with us today Eric Henning. Eric is a PhD candidate in the Department of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering here at Iowa State University. I'm not unbiased in this, but I look forward to hearing Eric. Eric is a student of mine. Eric um, has completed his master's at Iowa State University, working on prairie strips, and then on his PhD has been doing some work on drainage water recycling, but also some work looking at hydrologic and crop production impacts of drainage district improvements. And this is one of the components of Eric's PhD work, and he'll be defending this in just a little bit less than a month. This and other topics, but certainly something and that I think is important is understanding how drainage district improvements might be impacting some of the hydrology of the areas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric. As always, if you have questions or comments, please type those into the chat box and we'll get those to the Eric at the end, get those to Eric at the end of his presentation. With that, the virtual floor is all yours.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the introduction. I will say, I'm not just saying this because I work for Matt, but I'm a big fan of these Iowa Learning Farms webinars. And so I'm excited to be given one myself and just really thankful for the opportunity. Hopefully, you'll be able to learn something today. So with that, I want to start off by just giving a little bit of a brief overview of Iowa's tile drainage history. So if you look at the map on the top right of your screen, you see a land cover map of the state of Iowa from the 1850s. And so a lot of the state is covered by yellow, which represents prairie. But then you'll notice if you kind of zoom into that north central region of the state that I've labeled the Des Moines lobe, there's a bunch of little purple dots that represent wetlands. And so in this portion of the state, where it's most recently glaciated, there's a lot of these isolated depressional wetlands that we call prairie potholes. And so in the mid to late 1800s, when Europeans came to this part of the world and started settling, there was a big effort to drain the potholes in order to farm them. And so at this point in time, most agreed that water is the enemy and that drainage improves the land. So really the prevalent attitude was that drainage is really a public good and there's no drawbacks to draining these wetlands so that they can be farmed. Okay, so kind of the heyday of drainage in this part of the state was from the 1900s to the 1920s. And so at this time, as I mentioned, these wetlands are isolated depressional wetlands, so they don't have a surface connection to a natural outlet like a river or a stream. And so to be able to drain them off, you need to create that outlet. And so at this time, they were digging ditches and digging trenches and laying big tile main pipes in order to drain off that water. Um, and so as you can imagine, these outlets were shared by multiple landowners who wanted to put tile into their crop fields. And so, with that, they formed drainage districts to kind of construct and share some of the burden and the cost of constructing the outlets and maintaining the infrastructure. And so, over 100 years ago, technology and farming looked a lot different. Um, Much of the infrastructure was dug with steam shovel or by hand. So the technology was not nearly what it is today. And then also farming was a lot different. So farmers, a lot of them still used horses to farm, and so they grew some corn, but they also grew oats and hay to feed their horses, and they maybe didn't need as much drainage as a typical row crop farmer today. So fast forward now, we look at drainage districts in the state of Iowa today, and there's over 3,000 in the state, mostly concentrated in the Des Moines Loeb region. And a lot of these drainage districts actually retain the same infrastructure that was put in over 100 years ago. And so, naturally over time, some of this infrastructure can degrade and maybe it doesn't perform as well as it used to. And then, like I mentioned, farming and technology has changed. So some of these outlets might be undersized today by modern standards. So you might be asking why hasn't this infrastructure changed? Well, it's expensive to upgrade or repair drainage infrastructure. And so recent work has kind of shown that the payback period concerns are really the main barrier to modernizing some of our drainage infrastructure. Okay, so before I get too much further, I do think it's worth clarifying a few definitions that I'll be talking about a lot as this presentation goes on. So, a drainage coefficient, that's the unit of measurement that we use to determine the rate at which water can be removed from a drainage system. So, the real units would be inches per acre per day. Um, Typically, we just say the inches. So you might say that district has a half-inch drainage coefficient. Um, Next, a repair versus an improvement. When I talk about improved drainage infrastructure, I'm actually talking about um, bigger outlets. So if a drainage district wants to perform a repair, that just means that let's say the ditch has accumulated sediment. They just scoop out that sediment that's accumulated over time and don't add to the size of the ditch. That would be a repair. If they want to actually make the ditch bigger, that would be considered an improvement. An improvement has to jump through some more hurdles to be able to go through the drainage district. Actually, the trustees hold a hearing, and then landowners can oppose a proposed improvement. So if they don't want to pay the money to increase the outlet capacity in their district, they have that option. Whereas a repair, that's just authorized by the drainage district trustees. So that kind of leads a little bit into this project that was developed a little over 15 years ago, led by the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, or IDALS, and some of their partners. And it's called the Iowa Initiative, or the Iowa Plan. And the idea behind this initiative was that we would pair district outlet capacity improvements, so increasing that drainage coefficient in some of these older drainage districts, and then pair it with a wetland, a treatment water quality wetland at the outlet of the district. And so kind of the motivation was, let's see if we can get kind of a win-win. We'll modernize our drainage for better cropping, and then we'll also get some of the habitat and water quality benefits of having a constructed wetland at the outlet. So with the Iowa Initiative, there were actually 5 pilot projects that were completed between 2010 and 2013, where they did just that. They increased the drainage coefficient and put in a wetland. Um, if you're a longtime listener, you might remember over 3 years ago, Dr. Bill Crumpton gave a webinar on the nutrient removal capability of the wetlands in these pilot districts. And he showed that just because a wetland is below greater drainage capacity, it works just as well as if they put in a crop wetland at the outlet of just your status quo run-of-the-mill drainage district capacity. However, that's really kind of been the extent of some of the work that's been done on these projects as far as research work. And so a lot of the other effects to this point have been untested. And that's kind of where I come in. So our objectives were to really look at what happened as a result of these projects within the districts themselves, not just at that wetland. And so we have five pilot project districts. Um, we have DD 15 up in north in Palo Alto County, and we have DD 8 over to the west in Clay County, and then we have three Pocahontas County drainage districts, 48, 81, 65, and 178. And so all these districts had their drainage coefficients bumped up to at least half an inch. And we were interested in what happens to ponding within the crop fields of these districts. How does that translate into economic numbers? And then what happens with evapotranspiration or ET? And so to really test these questions, it's we know that weather changes from year to year, so it's a little bit not quite as simple as just looking at before and after. So we actually had to identify treatment or control pair districts. So we'd look for um, five other districts that were similar to the pilot project districts, but did not have improved drainage. And so we base that off of close proximity, similar soils, similar size, and similar topography. And you can see those added on the map to the right. Um, and so our hypothesis, really what we were kind of specifically what we were testing and what we thought we might see was that as a result of district outlet improvements, we thought we'd see significantly reduced cropland ponding. So just more outlet capacity, you can get rid of ponds quicker. We also thought we might see decrease ET in the spring. And so kind of the thinking behind that was if you have better drainage in the spring when a lot of ponding might occur or it's really wet, there's going to be less water available within the district to evaporate after district improvements. But then we also thought there might be increased ET in the summer. So the thinking behind that was, well, if you have drier conditions in the spring, you can get deeper crop roots, more vigorous crop by July, August, and those crops actually transpire more water, and we see an ET response. How did we test this? Well, for cropland ponding, we looked at satellite imagery. So we can take advantage of freely available satellite data from the Landsat and Sentinel satellites and then map out ponding. So this picture on the right, that's actually a Sentinel image. And those red areas are areas where we identified ponding. And so how we were able to do this, you can kind of tell just visually looking, you can see where ponds are, but you can also take advantage of the fact that surface water reflects light differently than other surfaces. So if you apply an index, in our case, a modified normalized difference water index, you can identify surface water really quantitatively better than just looking for ponding and kind of drawing ponds. Now, one of the limitations of this method is that, like a lot of other satellite-based analyses, you need cloud-free images. So what happens is these satellites are orbiting around the globe, and in case of Landsat, they might take a picture of Iowa every 16 days. And if they happen to take that picture on a day when it's cloudy, then unfortunately I cannot map ponding for that day. So what we ended up having to do is to look through a lot of different satellite images. And luckily we had a lot of years and a lot of satellite images to go through. So we have kind of a pre-improvement phase where we're looking at images from 1999 through 2009, and then a post-improvement phase, 2014 to 2024. So about 11 years where we're just combing through satellite images, looking for cloud-free images that have evidence of ponding. For ET, we're also using satellite-based methods. So there's this platform called OpenET that provides free ET data. Actually, now I think it just got released yesterday for the whole contiguous United States. At the time that we did this analysis, we were just looking at monthly data from 2016 to 2024. That was what they had available for Iowa at the time. And so we don't have that pre-improvement phase, unfortunately, but still with our paired um, design, we can look at the differences between corn and soybean ET, between improved and control paired districts. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the results. I think these images really paint a pretty clear picture. Um, on the right, you have image from 2008 before any of the pilot project improvements were made. And to the south, that's DD 65, quite a bit of ponding. To the north, that's DD 72, again, quite a bit of ponding, highlighted in the red. You fast forward to May 25th, 2019. Still in DD 72, there's quite a bit of ponding, maybe a little bit less than there was 11 years ago. But in DD 65, that South district that had the improvement and the wetland put in, the ponding is like nearly completely reduced. It's quite a dramatic difference relative to 2008. Okay, so now compiling all of these images that we looked at, this graph that I have on the screen shows all of our data points of the percentage of crop fields that were ponded in across the districts. And so there were 15 images that we were able to analyze in the pre-improvement phase and then 29 in the post-improvement phase. And so you notice that those points, those actually are connected by lines for the pairs. So you have your control district and your improved district for that pair. And the relationship between those treatments in the pre-improvement phase doesn't really, there's no clear trend. It's kind of a wash. But then if you look at that post-improvement phase, it's pretty obvious that the improvements significantly reduced ponding relative to the control districts. So after running some statistical analyses, what the number that we come up with for a percent reduction is 87%. So we can say that after drainage district improvement, there's 87% less cropland ponding extent in your drainage district. Now, I think another important thing to highlight with this is that, you know, as I mentioned, we have to look for cloud-free images. So these are not just ponds that come and go. The average time between an image that we analyzed in the most recent rainfall was nearly 3 days. So these are pretty, these are ponds that are lasting for a while. And you can imagine what that does to a crop if it's underwater for 3 days. So now let's think about, let's just do like a case study to put some numbers and think about this economically. We'll look at Palo Alto DD 15. And so just like DD 65, 2008, quite a bit of ponding in both districts, improved and control. And then 2018, it's significantly reduced in the improved district. And so we actually found that we were able to map ponding in 57% of the years. And so this is probably kind of a conservative estimate of how many years there's ponding because, like I said, we could only look at cloud-free images. And in those 57% of years, the average extent of ponding, average maximum extent of ponding in the control district was about 4%. So if we apply that 87% reduction to that 4%, then we're left with about 0.5% of ponding post-improvement. Now, okay, I got a big table with a bunch of numbers, but this is for your reference of how I kind of come up with ballpark estimates of the payback period just as a result of reducing ponding through drainage district improvements. So you don't need to look at every detail of the top, that kind of grayed out portion. What you need to know is that we're looking at the case study of DD 15 in Palo Alto County. Let's assume that 2/3 of the acres, any given year, are planted in corn. A third of the acres are in soybeans. We'll say these acres yield the county average for Palo Alto County. The cost of production is the recent estimates that ICU Extension releases every year. And then we'll consider the 10-year average for grain prices, and then give or take a standard deviation to kind of come up with a best case and a worst case scenario. And then our average case is, of course, that 10-year average grain price. So with that in mind, we went from 4% ponding down to 0.5%. It was 87% reduced. The cost, if we just did improvements and we didn't have that wetland, is nearly $800 per acre. If we have the improvement and the wetland, the actual cost of this project was a little over $1,800 per acre. And now, thinking about, what benefits do we get? Let's say we have 60% yield reduction in the ponded areas for the average case. This is a hard number to come up with. This is just kind of a ballpark because it really depends on the time of year and how long there's ponding, but we'll say 60%. That's being pretty conservative. And then we'll also say that we know that there's going to be some yield increase outside of the ponds in the remainder of the district. This is a hard number to come up with. So far, literature suggests 10% is kind of the ballpark, but again, let's be conservative. We'll use 10% as our best case, cut that in half for our average case, 5% yield increase outside of the ponds because of district improvements. And then we'll say that 70% of the years there is ponding, and give or take 20% for best case or worst case scenario. You boil all these numbers down to get a payback period, and we're looking at, for just improvements without a wetland, about 18 years. If you add in the wetland component, it goes up to about 33 years. So again, I just want to stress that these are ballpark numbers. There's a lot of other factors I'm not considering, but we're trying to be really conservative here and show that, these payback periods, guys, it's up to you whether that's feasible or not, but this is kind of an estimate of what they might be. Okay, now shifting back to ET. Two graphs I have on the screen. The top one is monthly ET totals in the control and improve districts. Really, that just shows that ET really peaks in July, in the summer months. And then the bottom graph is really the important one, and that's actually the difference between improved ET and control ET, and those are in units of millimeters. Okay, so those dots are the average difference between improved ET and control ET. So if a dot is below that dashed zero line, that means that there's greater ET in a control district than an improved district. And all those strips, those are just all the different data points that we collected. And the strips that are red, those signify that there's a statistically significant difference in ET between the improved and controlled districts. So you'll notice that all those red strips and the dots below the line, those are earlier in the year. That's in the spring and summer months. And the biggest differences are in May and June. In May, there's about 4 mm difference, or roughly 8%. And in June, it's about a 3 mm difference, or 3%. And so this kind of gives some support for our hypothesis that there'd be less evaporation, less soil moisture in your drainage district after you've done outlet improvements. Okay, so putting that all together, we can say that we're looking at about a 12 mm increase in ET annually after improvements, about 2% annual or I should say, yeah, 2% decrease in ET after improvements, or 12 millimeters. So really not that much. If you think about, 12 millimeters, that's what, like half of an inch. Um, and so what does that mean? Again, we think it's tied to evaporation. If you look at that picture, you'll notice the big blue blotches, especially in the DD 15 South, the control district. Those are where there's the highest ET. And if you remember back to the ponding, that actually is where we see the ponds. So we think that's, tied to the differences in ET are tied to evaporation from surface water. Um, and again, what does it mean? Like, who cares if ET is different? Well, what it might indicate is just kind of changes in the water balance and possible changes in flow. Because if you think about a water balance for a drainage district, um, the biggest input of water is precipitation. The biggest outflow of water is ET, water evaporating or transpiring, going to the atmosphere. And so, where does all the rest of that water go if there's more P than ET? Um, Over time, you can kind of assume that all that additional water goes to drainage, or that's a simplification, but it can kind of over time be flow. So let's just say that a difference in ET results in a difference in flow. And so by having less ET after an improvement, 12 millimeters less, you could say that probably at the top end, you're looking at a 4% increase in drainage flow. And so this is not one to one with the increase in drainage coefficient. If you're going from less than a quarter inch drainage coefficient up to half an inch, it's over, you're over doubling your drainage coefficient, and you're only adding about 4% drainage flow. So still, there are water quality considerations though. So again, kind of let's do some back of the envelope calculations, ballpark calculations. We'll take a 2,400 acre drainage district and say that the average flow aid concentration of nitrate leaving that district is about 17 milligrams per liter. What happens if we add 12 more millimeters of flow at that concentration? Well, without a wetland, that's about 2,000 extra kilograms of nitrate that's exported and gets into our rivers and streams. With a wetland, even with that additional flow, you're reducing nitrate by about 14,000 kilograms, assuming you get about 30% reduction from a wetland. So yeah, the drainage district improvements might not have that great of an effect as far as drainage volume, but it's really a great opportunity to put in some edge of field practices or different conservation practices like a wetland, so you can get some of those water quality benefits. And so I'm just kind of wrapping it all up with some key findings. You take a drainage district at below quarter inch drainage coefficient and you improve it to half an inch, you might expect to see an 87% reduction in crop field ponding. You also might see slightly less ET, about 2% less annually. As a result, that indicates we might see about 4% increase in flow, probably at the top end. And if you put in that treatment wetland, you can significantly reduce nitrate export and achieve some water quality goals to handle that possible additional flow. So, in an average case scenario, taking a look at economics and how long does it take to pay back these projects? If you're looking at just improvement without a wetland, it's roughly 18 years. If you have the improvement plus the wetland, it's about 33 years. And so that, I don't know, it might seem like a long time. It probably is, but if we consider that these projects have a 100-year design life, we can be pretty certain that they're going to pay for themselves eventually. And so I think that's all I got.
All right, great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Eric. Yep. Get your questions in. We have some, but we'll have should have time for plenty of questions. So if you watch this webinar live and are wanting to earn a CCA CEU before the end of the year, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, ALENAW at iastate.edu. Okay, next slide, Eric. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out this voluntary demographic survey, we would greatly appreciate it. You can scan that QR code or go to the iowalearningfarms.org/survey. Only one survey response is needed for all 2025 webinars. So if this is your first webinar of 2025 and you're willing to fill it out, that would be great. If you've watched it, you've heard my spiel on this before. So we'll go to the next slide. And it should be all right. We had one on prairie strips last week from Dr. Matt Stevenson, and next year we will have Rachel Dobradnik, if that's Rachel, exactly how to pronounce that. She's going to talk about managing prairie strips to improve soil health and farm profitability. Rachel's a PhD candidate in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences at Michigan State University. So please tune in Wednesday, January 7th, 2026 for that webinar. And you can go to the next slide, which should be this webinar and all previous webinars are archived. You'll note I put in the chat box the webinar link for Dr. Crumpton's webinar that Eric mentioned, looking at the water quality benefits of these types of wetlands. So the first question, Eric, is do you know what the drainage coefficients were in the 5 districts ahead of improvement?
Okay, so before they had
Yeah,
improvements, what were the
before the
drainage
improvements.
coefficients?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think all were uh quarter inch or less. So th those are kind of approximations, and you can read about them in the engineer reports. Um, so yeah, I believe most of them were at most a quarter inch.
And what would modern ASABE standards call for?
So half an inch, I would say, is kind of the standard. You'll see some that maybe three quarters or an inch. But half an inch is probably kind of your standard. I guess you know 3/8 maybe two.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd say half an inch.
And can you walk us through what the improvement process looked like? Did the districts have clay tile? And as part of this, were they increasing the amount of tiling across the district or just the size of the main?
Okay, so it kind of varies as far as if they're going from increasing the main or a ditch. Some of them had open ditches. Um, we don't know for sure if there was like more pattern tile in the district's crop fields as a result of increasing the main. You can kind of assume that having that additional capacity, there would be more tile that went into the ground. Um, I know for sure, at least in one case, um, there was some mitigation involved of a converted farmed wetland. So, you can be pretty certain that that had more tile that went in.
Yeah, but that any field tile increases were not done as part of as part of the improvement project. And most of them probably had old clay tile that was put in 100 years ago.
Hmm.
Yep. Okay, we have another one. For the yield reduction in the ponded areas, is the comparison between the improved condition and the existing condition. If you compared the improved condition to an undrained condition, oh, would the yield reduction be greater?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. And they're saying in the undrained, if there was no drainage district.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, those yield reduction values are kind of hard to come up with just because so much depends on the timing and the duration. Um, but we just kind of said that your yield in that pond, let's say it's the county average, and if it's stays ponded, you're going to lose about 60%, just on average. Um, and so, yeah, you would
It,
say if you went from undrained to drained, it'd probably be more.
yeah, that it we'd probably have greater ponding area if that district was completely undrained, if there was no drainage
Yeah,
district there. Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Um, y- oh, okay. There was a question about what you the payback slide, but can you I guess highlight again what were the average yield improvements you assumed?
Yep. I went, so I say that in the ponded areas, you're avoiding a 60% reduction by like getting rid of ponding. Outside of the ponds, just district wide, in the average case, we're looking at 5% for corn and 6% for soybean. And like I kind of mentioned, this is probably pretty conservative. I mean, like I know, like anecdotally, anecdotally,
Anecdotally,
anecdotally, um, I've heard a lot bigger increases.
yeah,
Um, but like I said, there's not much literature out there. Kind of the two numbers I came up with or found in the literature were 10 and 12%. And so just to be conservative, we cut it in half for an
okay.
average case.
Yeah, and that'd be kind of maybe a next step in this effort if I can find another student interested is trying to look at what that district wide yield improvement might be. And
Hmm.
this is a good slide to ask the next question. Um, that wetland improvement economic analysis, the improvement plus wetland payback period, that did not include any external funding for the wetland, right? That's just kind of,
Nope.
just what it would be if we were paying for the wetland as well as part of the yield improvements with drainage district improvement.
Correct. Yeah. With the pilot project, there was some cost share involved, but that number that I have, the 1853, that's not factoring in any of the cost share.
Oh, yeah. Okay, this was the ET measured in the wetlands and buffers the same way as the cropland?
Um, so yeah, I should have explained that a little bit better. We're actually just looking at cropland ET. So in this picture, all those like kind of dark areas, that's like a buffer that I remove. So I get rid of roads, I get
Okay.
rid of wetlands. So I'm just
Yep.
looking at ET in the crops.
Okay. Yep. To try to do an apple comparison with
Hmm.
that, not taking into account that, say, DD 15 North would have that area in buffer and wetland around there. You've masked
Yeah.
that out. So it's just comparing cropland in 15 North to cropland in 15 South.
Yeah.
Yeah. And same. Okay. Great. Um, Oh, okay. Um, yeah, this is a good one, and maybe they said when you compared the satellite data for pre and post improvement, did you compare images from after similar precipitation events?
Yeah. So that's one of the things. All of the images that well, okay. I'm looking for any ponding I can find throughout the year, but I need to have both of the paired districts in the same picture. So, I mean, yeah, the precipitation might be a little bit different between DD 15 North and DD 15 South, but we'll just assume that it's about the same. And then we're comparing the ponding between those districts at that given point in time. So, yeah, as far as like, was there the same precipitation in 2008 as there was in 2018? I can't really say, you know, but just looking at that relative change is what we were looking at, assuming that each of the districts had the same precipitation before that image was taken.
Yeah. And somebody asked that your payback period just included the drainage district investment cost. It didn't include possible mitigation costs or private drainage costs that might increase that as well.
Yep. Just the district main improvements.
Yep. Um, the installation of the wetland might take some land from production. Um, I guess were those costs included in the improvement costs or in
Yeah.
the improvement plus wetland cost?
Yep. So I have ones, and so actually I have gosh, if you notice, like kind of in the middle of the screen, I have wetland area corn yield. And so I did say that was probably a little bit lower because it's the lowest spot in the district generally. But then, at the same time, yeah, you're taking that out of production, but you're also could be saving some with the cost of production, not having those inputs. So I factored that in as well.
Okay. Um, we do have, okay, there's a question here. Any data on two-stage ditches? Actually, Dr. Sarah McMillan is starting some research on that. So kind of be on the lookout for potential webinars on that in the future.
Hmm.
There was one here, and I think if the if the ET is less with drainage improvement, um, this said if the ET is less with drainage improvement, then is there less water drain from the improved drainage coefficient? But no, actually, that if the ET is less, there might be you would deduce that there might be more water that would be available to other flow pathways.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the same amount of water. It's just where
Get
does it go? So
yep
if you take away from ET, it's got to go somewhere else.
somewhere. Yep. All right. I think that gets our questions answered. So, Eric, thank you so much. Somebody put in here too. Thank you for all your contributions to ILF over the years. You've contributed quite a bit with in many different areas, including going out with the trailer, helping with field days, lots of different things. And so, I we from I'll put on not my advisor hat, but my Iowa Learning Farms hat. Thank you very much for all of your contributions. Thanks for a great presentation, a good way to end 2025. And I hope everybody on here has a safe and joyous holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and please join us in 2026. First one on Prairie Strip. So thanks everybody, and thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you.